atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me, as always, my lovely co-host and editor.
Hello, I am Rex.
And we are back at it again for yet another episode. And can you believe it?
It's not Friday.
It's another episode of Kaiju Conversation. Once again.
You just said that.
I did.
That's crazy.
But can you believe it?
I can. I can. It is that day we record.
Episode 105.
Not a real number.
It is a fake number.
We're still in the tens.
You know, when you think about it, all numbers are made up.
Exactly. So we're just back in the tens.
So really, is there a real number? Is there a true number? What if it's all just not real? Do numbers actually have an existence? Or are they just a unified ideology that has conformed to society and it doesn't actually exist?
See, I'm not a mathematician, but I can relay the question to a couple friends of mine studying math. So
Thank you. I just, it doesn't add up to me. I think if we actually, you know, got down and divided and conquered here, we could really multiply our findings and really subtract from the ideology of society.
I'm about to subtract my life listening to these puns, so I think it's best we move on.
To the power of 2, right? Right? You're right. Let's get to the root of these problems.
Ah! You're an awful human being. Like
that equals out to me.
I'm at a loss for words. There's nothing I can even say.
Oh, God. That is hilarious. You know what might help you is a slice of pie. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Math Puns with Elijah, featuring a devastated Rex.
I truly hope we're not here all day.
We are here all day. But we're not going to be here all day over equations, because that just doesn't add up to me. So let me take a backtrack here and subtract away all of these puns and ask you to multiply our conversation by dividing it up into telling me about the root of your problems and how you've been.
Well, you know, I was doing great until just 5 seconds ago.
I don't believe that.
I was doing absolutely wonderful, and you've just ruined my day. Ruined my week. You're a horrible human being.
Thank you. I'll be here all day.
Please, go away now.
All right, you can podcast by yourself again, okay? All right, goodbye, everybody. It's been great knowing all of you.
Hey, Jurgen, come back, please.
So tell me how you've been.
Doing all right. Been busy. A lot of just being busy, really.
Is that so?
Yes. Yeah, working on work and also planning a short film for a group assignment and then filming like a practice exercise as well. That was fun, though.
Yeah, you were doing some filming the other day when we were texting.
Yeah. Went pretty decent. Yeah, we got it all done in time, which was good.
Good. It's always good when you can deliver stuff on time.
Yeah, especially since we needed to deliver the equipment back on time. Yeah, outside of that, I haven't really done too much. Been, I don't know, playing some Alien games in my spare time and just experimenting a bit with modeling in Blender. Other than that, not really too much there is to report on this week, I suppose.
Can we expect another Godzilla animation?
Not anytime soon, no.
Okay. Any other animations, or just kind of, messing around?
I don't know. I had an idea to just, like, I don't know, teach myself a bit of modeling with, like, some alien stuff and maybe just do, like, a little bit, like a small little, like, alien, at least, like, a shot or two. So, I don't know, maybe I'll do something, maybe I won't. I had an idea or two. So, we'll see.
Awesome. All right.
Depends if I can find a decent alien model, I suppose.
Do those not come very, very often?
There's some out there, but not too many that are currently working with my Blender. But I did find an add-on that might help it a little. But yeah,
okay.
We'll see. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know at this point in time.
I'm excited to hear the updates from this, see how it goes.
I did technically model an alien prop today, but it's a prop from Alien Isolation that I don't even know what it actually is. And the person, like the tutorial I watched that was like teaching me it, they didn't really say what it was. And they mentioned, but what they did mention about the prop in their video is that they were talking to an Alien Isolation like game dev, and even the game dev didn't know what it actually was.
Oh,
so that's kind of funny. I don't know. It looks like some sort of like almost like a hand grenade, almost, but it's probably not a grenade.
Okay.
But yeah, how about yourself?
Well, my updates are a little, probably even worse than yours.
Awesome.
I've been working, as you know, like that's all I do is work. I did get my Japan Collector's Edition Godzilla -1 Blu-ray 4K combo package.
Yeah, where's mine?
It's in the mail. You actually have all your stuff. My question to you is, where's my money?
Hey, now. Eventually.
Probably
sometime soon. Sometime very soon.
You know, when I messaged you and I said, hey, when would I get paid back for the shipping? You were like, ETA, that's it. Nothing.
Oh, I did that to be funny.
Nothing. You're gonna rip me off here. You're gonna just run off with this -1 set and leave me alone.
I could.
And you would.
I really could.
But the question is, will you?
You'll just have to find out.
Will Rex rise to the occasion and deliver
how much
the
is it again?
he owes?
How much is it again, by the way?
It's like $40. Hey, you're okay.
Why is your country so expensive to get stuff shipped from?
You know, I asked that question a lot myself. But outside of that, you know, I know. I watched it though. I watched it for both of us.
I hate you.
And I can say this: Anthony Kim remains the man, the myth, the legend. Though oddly enough, the home video release does not translate the actors or Takashi Yamazaki's name in the credits.
Oh, so it's like the subtitles in the Australian release. I see how it is.
Yeah. And I'm not a fan of that. I don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like it should be bare minimum to at least bare minimum actors, director credits.
Right.
Like subtitle.
And I like they exist. So why do they not do that? I don't get it.
Right. Yeah.
I have my doubts that they ran out of storage for like 5 lines of text.
Yeah, 5 lines of text on an SRT file. That truly takes up a lot of storage space.
Truly. Yeah, so that's a little confusing.
I did see that tweet about the bonus features and the little message they put on that.
Yeah, so for anybody who's confused on what Rex is mentioning, so it's not actually on the bonus features tab. It's just when you open the movie, when it goes up, like before you can even go to the main menu, it pops up with the disclaimer of to prevent or to keep the Japanese home video experience. Nothing on this disc is translated except for the movie.
It was an artistic decision, guys.
Though oddly enough, so this is something funny. The booklet that comes with the sets, if you ordered it, you actually got a PDF emailed to you.
Yeah.
And it's of a translated booklet. They could not, like, they're not going to send it out. They could easily mail those out for cheap. Like, you don't need a lot of postage for a booklet. They could have easily done that. You know, they could have delayed the release and actually had it translated and printed. But instead, we get a PDF. I don't get Toho sometimes.
It's
like, they literally went out of their way to pay for a translation.
Certified Toho moment.
But hey, I did see this comment on the post you're referring to. At least Toho, like, did this. Like, this is unprecedented. And I do give them that. Like, the fact that we're getting the Japanese release over here, like, for US audiences, and it's not a huge price. Plus, we're getting a 4K Steelbook, a 4K, a Blu-ray, a DVD. We got minus color. We got -1. This is the first. This will end up being. It'll compete. It'll either be the first Godzilla Toho film to be on 4K here in the States, or it'll be the second one. But it's going to be really close. So I give Toho this. Like, -1 has proven to be a very important title in all of this.
It's so important that it's coming back to theaters in a lot of countries.
Yeah.
Imagine if own.
That's true. Isn't it?
And
for
we're getting
minus
color. I think it's about a week.
Oh,
getting
sweet.
minus color, -1, and that same week, 4K of 54.
You've got a lot coming.
Yeah, that's all. I guess that week I'm just watching all Godzilla movies and nothing else.
That's fair.
Especially since we've got the Kaiju Conversation schedule of that month.
That's a hint of things to come.
So, yeah. By November's end, I'm going to be Godzilla'd out.
Yeah, that sounds right. I know here in the States, -1's getting shown at one theater in LA, along with, I think it's minus color and Shin Godzilla Ortho. Those are what's getting shown.
Yeah, I did hear about that.
So we're getting our second showing of Shin Godzilla Ortho in the States. I'm really hoping that comes to Blu-ray, considering the fact that I think Toho has the rights to Shin Godzilla back. Because the DVD's been out of print for a couple of years. The Blu-ray DVD's been out of print. And the regular Blu-ray, I think, is no longer in print. And it's no longer streaming.
Oh, dear God, I'm going to be spending a lot of money at the theaters this October, November. Oh, boy.
I won't be.
Well, you're not getting, like, 8 Kurosawa films released in, like, 2 weeks.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I ended up missing out on the Seventh Samurai showing. I was really upset about that.
Oh, damn. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I never had time.
I'm genuinely, I really want to see that, and at least Ikuru, Yojimbo, and maybe High and Low. Those are like at least got to see those.
Yojimbo, I cannot recommend enough. I know for a fact that
I've seen Yojimbo before, but I want to give it not in theaters, no. But I want to give it another watch.
Dude, I love Yojimbo. But yeah, outside of that, now I know last time. Well, first of all, happy October. We are officially in spooky season.
It is October when this comes out.
It is officially spooky season.
When this comes out, yes, it is.
And so we are going to be watching a ton of horror this month, as we always do.
Yes. I even started early on my own with some horrors.
So we're going to be covering all of that on the show and then off the show. You know, you and I both have plans. We're going to watch Planet of the Vampires, Dark Star, Alien, and Aliens.
Yes.
My whole thing is I watch a horror movie a day up until the 31st, where I watch John Carpenter's The Fog, my favorite horror film of all time. So it's going to be a good month. I have a ton of J-horror that I have not watched that will be watched. And I might end up watching some Dracula, and I think it's The Wolfman. I think I have those 2 box sets.
Oh, nice. My next Universal horror movie is going to be Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, so I'm excited for that one.
That's a good one. So there's a lot of cool stuff coming up. Outside of that, I'm trying to think if there's really much else. That's pretty much it in terms of stuff coming up. I do have one more thing to talk about. I'm happy I can talk about something. Also, just throwing it out there, -1, and then I'll throw this back to you. -1's the only tokusatsu I've watched this week. Yeah. So outside of that, I do want to talk about... Not even any
Zatoichi?
No, I have been too busy. Now, I'm proud to announce what I've been busy with. Last episode, I was struggling because it hadn't been announced, but now it has been announced thanks to Kaiju United and Avery Guerra. We were able to announce it. Kaiju United actually got the exclusive for it, and that is I am once again working with SRS Cinema on a new Japanese tokusatsu sharksploitation movie. I am proud to announce I am the bonus feature producer on a film called Sharkdemic, originally released in Japan as Reiwa Shark. And
nice.
I am doing quite a lot for it. I am interviewing the director as an audio commentary track. I am doing an introduction to the film. I am licensing myself the music video to be included, and I was the consultant on getting his 2 other short films, Strongest Sharkman and Reiwa Shark versus Ultra King Buraku, I think is the title. And then I wrote some liner notes, Nihon no Suma, a journey into Japanese shark history, covering the rich culture of sharks in Japan, both in cinema and in mythology. And I'm also directing, writing, and producing the first episode of a new series that SRS Cinema is going to be having on a multitude of releases called Digging Deeper, Stories from the Underground. Episode 1 is titled They Came from the Skies, which will be me interviewing a couple of filmmakers and fans of horror on natural horror and its connections to underground independent cinema.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, this whole week was writing the introduction scripts, compiling the questions for the commentary, getting them translated, working out a deal for the music video, and writing the script for that, for Digging Deeper Underground, or Digging Deeper Stories from the Underground. So that has been filling my time. I think sure I can. I can also talk about. And I have seen Reiwa Shark. I think I was not able to mention that prior when I did see it, but I did watch it this week, so we can throw that on there. I watched Reiwa Shark. This was my second time watching it. It was simply to finalize my questions for the commentary. Outside of that, I think I can also officially announce this because by now it is officially out there and it is confirmed. I think it's already confirmed. I am directing my first paid gig.
Nice.
I am among the filmmakers working on SRS Cinema's upcoming project, Amityverse, which is an anthology movie or series of movies, finalizing SRS's Amityville run of films.
So is this what the Vasquez was from?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, there's still something else I can't talk about that I can't wait to announce.
I see.
That one's actually outside of SRS. I'll tell you that much.
Huh. Interesting.
It's outside of SRS, but it is a company. So, yeah.
I see.
I am directing I'm directing, writing, and editing what is tentatively titled Amityville Bloodlines. Now, this film or series of films, I don't know which one it is yet, is a compilation of about 10 6 to 9-minute short films that are set in an Amityville universe. So, I'm pretty excited. This is a lot bigger than Zillafoot, plus it's paid. Not by much, but it is paid. Which is fine. It's official. It's like I'm working on this and I'm really excited. I've already got my plot done. I've already, of course, submitted it. I've got approved and I have an idea of where I'm going to film. I what's funny is all the money I'm getting, which is, again, is not a lot, but it's going right back into production. And then I'm going to be putting in more money because I'm going to have to invest in some more production stuff. Namely lights with gel. Light gel. Nice. And then I need to also get a portable generator. So that alone is enough to take all the budget I'm getting and then more. Because that stuff's not cheap.
How much would a generator be?
it can cost up to $4,000.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But that's for the big ones that you haul around with vehicles. Plus they're gas powered, so you also have to pay for gas. But I'm very excited about that. That will be going into production October, so this month, through December. So I have a lot of work ahead of me. So between wrapping up on Sharkdemic, which by the time this comes out, it should be wrapped. I've had way more production time on this title, so it's been a lot easier to figure out what to do, plan and prep. And now we're going into the production phase of this project. And as soon as this is done and wrapped, I go right into Amityville Bloodlines. And then whenever that's done, I don't know what I'll be doing next, but I know there's more SRS on the way. And that's about all that I think I can talk about.
I see.
I have a lot going on.
Sounds like it.
And hopefully it continues to grow. I need to quit my job and go into this full time. I don't know. I think as of the last couple of recordings, the last two, I think I was on Zatoichi Meets Yojimbo, which is the 19th film of the 26 original Zatoichi movies. I have not watched it yet, partially because it is 2 hours. It's the longest Zatoichi movie yet.
Damn.
I do want to watch it, and I'm hoping that this coming week I can get back into watching movies. And because now with Reiwa Shark, I'm set. I just have to schedule stuff. And I do still have one script I gotta write, but like that's it. So now that it's mostly just scheduling and then filming and then editing, I think the next week or two should be a pretty easy week for me. So I'm hoping that I can wrap up Zatuichi. I'd love to get the Second Lady Snowblood film knocked out. I'd love to finish up the Birdemic trilogy. I still got 2 of those I need to watch for Sharkdemic. And then I also have a couple movies coming in the mail, and I'm hoping I can watch a couple of those.
Nice. Well, I'm
Rex,
sure you'll at least get through a bit in October.
That definitely will happen. Rex, have you watched any tokusatsu this week?
Actually, yes, I have, believe it or not.
Was it more than my 2 titles?
I mean, if you count like tokusatsu, Jason, not really tokusatsu, but yeah, related-ish. Then I guess it'd be more, yeah.
Let's hear them.
Well, to start us off, I kind of got into I was in a little bit of a J-horror mood at the end of last weekend, and I ended up watching a film titled Echo Echo Azarak, Wizard of Darkness, which is by the director Shimako Sato, aka Takashi Yamazaki's wife.
I'm trying to remember, he worked on those too, I think.
I don't think so.
I think it was a small role, if I remember correctly.
Maybe. I don't know. I think he worked on at least one of her films, like K20. I think he worked on.
He worked on K20. He co-wrote that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But I could have swore he did something on those.
Maybe it'd be cool if he did. And yeah, I like the film actually. It was pretty good, pretty simple, like little kind of low-ish budget J-horror.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fun. Had a good time with it, and I look forward to watching the second film and maybe the others if I like the second film enough to.
I want to say, isn't there 3 or 4?
There's like 4 and a animated prequel or something, or short film, something like that. I'm not entirely sure. But I do know, and there's a TV show as well. But
So
as far as like the original, the first sequel to it, Echo, like the second film is the only one that brings back Shimako Sato as director and the lead actress of the first film.
Okay,
and it has Hideo Yamamoto apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, apparently. I don't know if he's like the villain in it or what, but kind of piques my interest just having him involved in it. Oh, yeah, so, and apparently Yamazaki did special effects on the second one.
Okay, that makes sense. So you enjoyed it?
Yeah. I actually quite enjoyed it.
Good. Outside of that, do you have any comments on the film you really want to share?
Not terribly many, other than it kind of reminded me of Sweet Home in a sense of it's definitely a Japanese film, but it's kind of got a little bit of that Western horror feel, if that makes sense. But other than that, I didn't have too many other like specific thoughts on it, at least that I can recall.
Okay.
Outside of that, I watched A Snake of June by Shinya Tsukamoto, which was really good.
Nice. That I have that box set. I have that in there. I'm trying to remember. I think my next film on that box set to watch it's either Snake of June or Vital.
I've been meaning to put on more Tsukamoto films, and now that I will possibly be. Oh god, that comes out like the same. Oh, that's showing the same week as like a bunch of the Kurosawa films. Oh no. Now that I might be seeing his newest film in theater, I figured I may as well use this time to at least watch a couple more of his films, since really I'd only seen Tetsuo and Tetsuo 2.
Oh, you need to watch The Adventures of Denshu Kozo.
Oh, I do. I need to watch that, Tokyo Fist, and
honestly, Tokyo Fist is
most of the other films.
Yeah, no, I have A Snake of June, Vital Haze, Kotoko, and Killing. That's next on my list, but I also want to watch Gemini.
Yeah. No, I've heard good stuff about like most of his films.
Have you watched Hiroku the Goblin?
No, I have not.
That's a yokai film, technically. It's actually adapted off of a manga, I believe, called Yokai Hunter?
Yeah, because it's Japanese title. It's like Yokai Hunter or something.
Yeah.
It's like Hiroku Yokai Hunter or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I need to watch more of his films.
You should, yeah, because the thing about, if you get the Arrow set, you get his first handful of films, except for Hiroku the Goblin and Gemini. And then you also miss out on Nightmare Detective and Nightmare Detective 2, which I don't know anything about those. I don't think those even got released over in the States. And then you get Killing, of course, or Kotoko and Killing. It skips Fires on the Plain, which is a Konichikawa remake, I think.
Yeah.
And it skips over Tetsuo the Bullet Man, but that movie, not really Tsukamoto's best.
Hey, I've never seen it. I can't judge yet.
I can judge, though. I've seen it.
I can't yet.
It looks like Nightmare Detective got a DVD release, so it looks like it might just be the first one. So my question is, where is the Blu-rays for that? Because I think that's the only two titles, or I guess Fires on a Plane. I don't know, but
I think that
most of his,
or at least a UK Blu-ray, I think it has. Most
of those have gotten. Most of his filmography has gotten US releases on Blu-ray. It looks like Nightmare Detective doesn't have a release period.
Oof, that's unfortunate. But it is what it is. Outside of that, because I ended up rewatching Beetlejuice with a friend of mine, I ended up last night the night before, kind of being in the mood to watch another film of a similar tone, of a similar horror comedy tone with a little bit of musical numbers. So I ended up finally getting around to watching Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, okay. The movie that I cannot watch for probably another year or two.
Well, you've just seen it too many times?
Yeah. On the 21st day in the month of September, in a decade not too long before our own, the human race suddenly faced a deadly threat that threatened their very existence. And this threat appeared in... and this threat appeared in the most unlikely of places.
Something like that. Something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I remember something like that.
And the threat, as most threats often do, does something. Does something. I don't know.
Something. Feed me.
No, because after that it starts into the piano, and then you get the opening Little Shop of Horrors intro. Little shop of horrors, little shop of horrors, little shop of terror. No, no, little shop of horrors, little shop. Yeah, and then from there it transitions into introducing to you Seymour, Mr. Mushnik, and Audrey.
Yeah, and I don't think the audience needs us to explain the whole plot of Little Shop of Horrors.
And then it goes into my favorite part of, honestly, oh God, I don't know what my favorite part of that movie is anymore. I do love Downtown, that whole musical number.
Oh, yeah.
So beautiful. When we did that.
Steve Martin's musical number.
See, I like that. I love Downtown, though, where the folks are broke. You go downtown, where your life's a joke. You go downtown. Yeah, that one's really good. I will say this. One thing that the movie cut that is like a war crime is supper time. I think it is.
No, I think
it is.
I think that's in the movie.
Oh wait, no, it's not supper time. It is. What is it? Maybe is it Sanix? Is that the title of that?
Well, I don't remember it.
I'm trying to think. Hold on. Give me a second.
Just me, grandmother, out of space, and I'm just bad.
Sominex, Supper Time 2. That one's really good. I love that one. And then another one that I love that we actually had to cut from ours is You Never Know, which is a Mushnik single. That's really cool. I like both of those. That is genius writing right there. Both the film and in the actual play. Like if you actually break it down and you like analyze it, it's a very beautiful. It's an amazingly written script. It's got a lot of cool things. It covers a lot of the human condition actually, and you know the characters are just so beautifully done. I love that. I Little Shop of Horrors, and if we're talking the movie itself specifically, it is such a genius in terms of like. It's probably the best remake of all time.
Like it is good. Like when I watched it, I kind of just ended up thinking, yeah, that was good. But the longer I've sat on it, like over the past few days, the longer I've had to sit on it, the more I'm like, that was actually really good.
Yes. No, from the fact that you realize that there was no stop motion and no CGI for the puppet.
Oh yeah, no, the Audrey 2 looks incredible the entire film. Mm-hmm. Just the way the mouth moves in general looks just oh my god.
The only way they did that though is they had to actually shoot it at like 1/25th the speed. So all of the actors, it's not a double composite or anything. The actors are interacting with Audrey too. Then and there. They're just moving at a really slow speed and they're delivering their lines at a very slow rate. And then they had to go back and dub themselves over later.
Well, credit where credit is due. I didn't notice.
Yeah, no, it's like seamless. And I think this part specifically is because it's also a play and the art design and art direction is like pinnacle, like stage show stuff. You have to have a good art director and great art design or your play will not go through. The designs in Little Shop of Horrors are amazing. I miss being able to walk on the stage, to be honest. Granted, there wasn't really a lot to the set, but just being able to like walk in Mushnik and Sons or Mushnik's flower shop was really amazing. And then, being there to see and be with the Audrey 2 puppet. See, now you got me on this whole thing about a Little Shop of Horrors. This is why I cannot watch it for at least another year and a half. I will say though, getting to direct the suit actor for our Audrey 2 was probably some of my favorite directing I've ever done. It also required me to get into the puppet to kind of show him. So that was cooler. I loved being in that.
God,
I guess I've done two.
Audrey 2 is so cool.
So how did you like Little Shop of Horrors?
It was really good. As I said, the longer I had to sit on it, the more I liked it.
And Ellen Green, I think is her name, the actress for Audrey. she was also the Broadway actress, so that was really cool.
Ah.
She actually has done it in recent years, I believe. But like she did it with like the new cast. So here you have like this older woman.
This older woman
playing
falling in love with like a 20-year-old or something.
Yeah. And it's been interesting too. So in the film, the street urchins, Crystal, Chiffon, and Ronette, actually in some adaptations of the stage play, there's actually like 6 street urchins. Yeah. For ours, we only had 3, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it was really cool to see that, and those 3 characters are really cool too, because they are they break the fourth wall. They're the singing goddesses in Hercules. They're the ones there to kind of talk to the audience while it's going down, and seeing Seymour, this like very innocent character, go through this metamorphosis that in any other story is the hero's journey. He gets the girl, he gets the shop, he has his redemption, right? Or not his redemption, but his call to action. But in this story, they flip it. And, he kills the dentist. He ends up killing Mushnik. And he follows the plant's requests. And even though in the theatrical version they survive, I love the original where like he dies and Audrey dies too. I think that's he
feeds
way
it
more
Audrey,
impactful.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yeah. In the original story, the way it works out is Seymour feeds Audrey to Audrey 2, because that's the only way that she can. The way that Audrey says it to Seymour is like, feed me to the plant, that way I can live forever in the plant. And then he does that, and then he like has his come to Jesus moment and like freaks out, and then he ends up, jumping in head first into the plant himself. That's in the original Broadway version. In the film, it's very much not that. I think, if I remember correctly, they both die and get eaten at the same time.
In the film, nah.
In the original version,
in the original version of the film, it's a happy ending. In the theatrical cut.
No, I'm talking about the original.
The original ending. Oh, right.
Did you watch the original ending?
I've seen like clips of it. I haven't.
Oh, come on! No, you have to see the original ending. That is like legitimately some of the best effects.
Oh, I've seen all
American
I've seen all the
movie.
effect stuff. That looks really good.
And like it's a way better ending. That is one of the examples of like the general audience just doesn't understand art. They should have never cut that ending. See what happens? You mentioned Little Shop of Horrors, and we go on a tirade.
I'm not surprised.
I feel like that's not the movie you would think that I would go on a tirade about. Like, in all honesty, like I feel like that's like one of the last films somebody would be like, Elijah probably would go on a tirade about this film.
Well, yeah, but they didn't know you. They probably didn't know you when you were working on the production, so.
True, but even then, it's like, I don't like musicals. I don't watch stage plays. I'm not the biggest fan of American, movies in general. I mean, I love American movies. Some of them are my favorite, but, in general, I feel like I'm more of a Japanese film guy. And it's a remake. Like, I feel like there's a lot against it, but here I am being like all uppity about how Little Shop of Horrors is.
Yeah, because it's
pinnacle.
Good.
It is good. It's great. It was better before the audiences messed up. Frank Oz was a good director.
Well, as much as I know you could talk about Little Shop of Horror for all day, that unfortunately is not what we're here to talk about, I believe.
Oh yeah, that's right. We're here to talk about a movie.
Yeah.
Right?
A scary movie in particular, because it's October. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, don't you remember?
We're gonna have to cut this part because I don't remember.
Well, I'm not gonna cut it because you say this every single time. It's almost like it's a bit. Yeah, because you're stupid and don't remember.
Damn.
Hey, I only speak in the truth.
That's not true.
Is it now?
Mm-hmm. So, can you give me 100 guesses to figure out what movie?
Absolutely not.
Would I be too much of a monster if I did that?
Yes.
Okay. Give me a hint.
Monogatari.
Ugetsu.
No. All right, that was your one guess. No more. Today, dear listeners, we are covering Yokai Monsters 100 Monsters.
Also known as Yokai Hyaku Monogatari.
You got it there.
I did. I was about to say Hayaku. But I was like, no, that's not right. That's saying hurry. Yokai Hyaku Monogatari.
Hyaku.
Or 100 yokai stories.
Mm-hmm.
Not 100 monster stories. That's not.
Do we want to title?
Yeah. So where do we even start here? Like we can talk about yokai, we can talk about Dai, we can talk about the film, we could talk about the yokai in it. Where do we even start?
Well, I'm curious because you always seem to have a little something on Dai. So do you have anything in particular on Dai of note this time?
Actually, so this is something kind of surprising. So this film was produced by Dai Kyoto, the same company that would do Daimajin and Zatoichi. Right. Not Dai Tokyo, the ones that did The Snake Girl and the Silver-Haired Witch or the Gamera series. Now, outside of that, the weird thing about this film is it's very detached from pretty much everything else going on at Dai. These films did not receive funding from the Japanese government. These films, I presume, just kind of reused some assets from various productions, and then, of course, they made their own stuff.
Right. I mean, they used they reused things from a series
Buddha?
called Akado Suzunosuke, if I'm not mistaken, which was produced by Dai Kyoto as well, of course.
And then they also reused something from Buddha, the 1961 film. But that was for the yokai themselves, and was like masks and whatnot, like the actual parts on the face. Right. Outside of that, there's not a lot to this film that's actually connecting to Dai. Now, if you want to contextualize it, 1968, this is right after the beginning of the Japan Film Export Promotion Association, which, as we've talked about in our Gamera versus Gyaos episode. Go check that out if you want to learn more about that. This film was not impacted by that. This film wasn't released during Golden Week. This film wasn't... Nagata didn't... There's no credit to a Nagata on here. Not his son and not Masashi himself. So this is towards the end of Dai's existence. This is the last 3 years of Dai that really died in 1971. So it's kind of a last hurrah, but it's just kind of one of those films that was made, oddly enough, during Dai Kyoto's like big push. It's kind of weird because in a lot of sense, the film definitely feels like it's picking up right where Daimajin left.
Oh, you could say that again. I mean, a lot of the crew from this does come from Daimajin, to be fair.
Yeah. I mean, it's set in Edo period Japan. It is a Jedi Geki film. It definitely reuses assets from Zatoichi. The people behind it worked on Zatoichi. It's Dai Kyoto, of course. And it was the B picture, right? I think. No, it would have been an A picture. It was the A picture to Dai Tokyo's B picture, which was Gamera vs. Virus.
Yeah.
Yeah, it came out March 20th, 1968 on the spring break for the Japanese school children, double billed with Gamera vs. Virus. But yeah, no, I don't have really any Dai origins here. There's nothing really. By this point, in 1968, I think Dai had pretty much settled following their push for the Japan Film Export Promotion Association.
Yeah. Although it is worth noting that at this time, this film came about kind of, I guess, in response, in a sense, to a sort of renaissance of sorts for yokai media in Japan.
Yes. It was a recent boom as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or do you want me to? I got a little bit here too.
Sure. I'm curious what you've got, if you've got a little more than me.
Well, there's a lot to really cover with yokai that I don't think we really have the time or the knowledge to really dive into, because yokai is from Japanese folklore that goes all the way back to the Kojeki, which is the earliest Japanese publication ever. That details the birth of Japan. It's based in Shintoism, where there's a god for everything. It's got some Buddhism influences. It's got Chinese influences.
Right.
The kitsune, which is a yokai, the nine-tailed fox, comes from the sea creatures of the mountains and seas, which is a Chinese book.
Right. And similarly, like even one of the yokai that appears in this film, the Rokubo, that has had its origins potentially, like, not confirmed necessarily, but linked to Chinese stories of flying head tribes, which those that folklore has existed for about like 2 decades or so, or 2 centuries.
There we go.
Oh my god. English.
Right, and the thing about yokai is there's so many, and depending on who you ask, like the idea of yokai can either be very strict or very loose. But for every time people talk about that, they also mention how there's differences between yokai and bakaneko, or those are transforming creatures. A vampire would classify as a bakaneko. You have yurei, which are vengeful spirits, which some people classify as a subcategory of yokai, while others say they're not. Some examples of yurei in modern Japanese pop culture: Sadako and Kayako. But even to that point, there is a yokai that appears in this film we're about to talk about, that their whole thing is they are a person with long black hair that, when you get too close, strangles the person who's close by and cuts them up, which you can trace to X-Day or killer hair extensions. The Kusuke Onna, the slit-mouthed woman, is a modern day Kuchisake Onna, is a modern day yokai. So there's a lot to the idea of yokai. There's yurei, there's bakaneko, there's oni, which are demons.
Right. The most famous, perhaps the most famous yokai is the kappa.
I would agree with that. I think kappa is probably. I mean, if you are a kaiju fan, Death Kappa is quite literally the yokai kappa. That suit came from a yokai movie called Kibakichi, right? Or did that come from
I'm pretty
Sayora the Demon Slayer? It's one of those two Tomu Haraguchi films. Even Gappa, the Triphybian monster, I theorize has some influences from yokai. And the reason I bring up all this and what you mentioned, the yokai boom of the 1960s. So yokai is from traditional Japanese folklore. Not necessarily meant to, they're not killers per se. Some are, but not all of them. Right. A lot of times they were stories to keep children from doing things.
Right. Much like folklore in a lot of other countries where it often taught morals. Yeah.
One of the yokai was a man who worked in a rice field, and he worked till he died. He died in the rice field. And the whole thing was, once it gets close to dusk, if you're a kid and you're out in the rice fields, he will come and snatch you up. So you cannot be out playing after school. You have to go home. That was a way to scare kids into going home and not messing around after school. That's a yokai that also appears in this movie, and I've got a list of all the yokai that have been identified.
I'm sure you do.
But they were stories that were passed from generation to generation. Now, I believe it's the Sengoku period, they started to modernize Japan. And one of the things that was forbidden during that period was the belief of yokai. Talking about yokai, sharing the stories, believing in them. They said that was a mental deformity.
Mm-hmm.
You were treated as crazy if you talked about yokai, which is very interesting because that's a storyline that has appeared in various films, not about yokai per se, but the idea of pushing away the folklore, the stories, the idea of magic and monsters. That's a storyline we see in stories today. So yokai kind of died, except for small isolated areas where the village elders had these stories of yokai. And it just so happened that one of the people that was in these areas was a man named Shigeru Mizuki, who in the early 1930s witnessed a picture story show called Parenting Ghost. It was very popular in Japan. It was even as popular, if not more popular, than Golden Bat, which is the world's first superhero. But he witnessed that picture story show, which was one of those things where the person has their little wagon and it's a puppet show, or it's these paper illustrations of stuff, and he tells the story as it goes on.
Right.
So he created a manga called Kitaro of the Graveyard, and it was a manga in a magazine, but it did not do well. He did this in 1954. It didn't take off. It just kind of died. So it got republished a couple times, but he would go on to make a manga called Akuma-kun, which became a Toei Tokusatsu television show in 1966 called Devil Boy. And the show got really popular, and due to its popularity, his work started to grow in popularity again. And in Devil Boy, yokai were included. So those were some of the creatures that our Devil Boy fought. And then his other works got picked up and were republished or became an anime, such as Gege no Kitaro, which was an anime in 1960. Some people say 67. I've only seen 1968.
I read 68.
And then 1968 also saw another tokusatsu show called Kappa Senpai Great Yokai Strategy. And so in 1967, 1968, the concept of yokai became even more popular. It's also important to note that in 1966, you saw The Magic Serpent, which was a Toei kaiju movie adapting an old story, Jirai the Ninja, which had magical creatures in it. And then you also had in 1966 or 1967 to 1968, Akage no Ninja, which was Red Shadow, which also had yokai or magical beasts in it. So the idea of magical beasts had been growing in popularity towards the latter half of the 1960s, especially thanks to anime. Ultra Q and Ultraman also was another example of like bringing those yokai ideas to the modern day.
Mhm.
And so during all of this, Daiei would reissue their Ghost of Yotsuya film from 1959 and Ghost Story of Kakui. These were reissued in June of 1967, and they did very well upon their reissue. And so towards the end of the year, in 1967, Daiei would have Daiei Kyoto work on a new film called Yokai Hyaku Monogatari. And that's what we got here in spring of 1968. There are more influences, but if you have anything you want to add, I want you to be able to add that.
Well, talking about the influences specifically, yeah, I think it's interesting. I thought it was interesting to learn that this film takes influence from a 1937 film that I believe is titled The Seven Wonders of Honjo, which was by Shinko Cinema, a company that that did have the involvement of a Mr. Masaichi Nagata and would kind of merge with both Nikatsu and what would become Daiei.
Yep. Which is, we covered that in, I want to say it's the Whale God episode where we covered the
Something
establishment
like
of Daiei. Yeah. Now, to add on to that, Rex, there's also a 1914, 1921, and 1957 version of that story.
I knew about the 57 one. I didn't know about the ones prior to that. That's interesting.
Now, from what I could find, all of them are lost but the 57 version.
Yeah, no, I was struggling to find anything other than the 57 version. At first, I thought I wasn't entirely sure if they were separate films or if they were the same until I realized they were from different companies and directors.
The 57 film was by Shintoho, the same company behind Space Giants. Now, in the 1957 version and in the 1937 version, there were yokai. Now, from what we know about the 57 one, the Roku Rokube was in it. The Korakasa Kozo, the umbrella yokai. The Nopera Bo yokai and the Chochin Obake yokai were all included. All of which would be very much present in Yokai Hyaku Monogatari.
Right, and one of the seven wonders of Honjo, the story Oitekebori is told in this film from 1968 as well.
Yes. Which that's the Lantern Ghost, right? Or are you talking about?
It's the one that tells them to leave.
Yes,
with the two guys fishing.
Now, it is a little different. The story's a little different. I actually wrote down the story.
Right. I mean,
there's
a couple variants of the story, yeah.
Yeah, there's 3 variations, and I've got those for when we get to that part. But when I went back and learned this, I thought that was really cool how they straight up adapted that.
Right.
So there is one last thing really to establish, and that's the idea of Hyaku Monogatari, 100 stories.
Right.
Because that is actually something that is also based in Japanese history, the idea of telling 100 stories. So it's a traditional method of storytelling for ghost stories specifically. And I'd love to be able to sit on one of these. I feel like that'd be really cool. So the way it goes, and the film explains this too, but we'll establish it here. After you you have to tell 100 ghost stories. As each story goes by, you have 100 candles lit, and each of those candles go out. Now, once you finish the 100 stories and the last candle goes out, a ghost appears. Now, this concept dates back all the way to the Edo period from what historians have been able to tell, probably based on guards who were at temples and whatnot stationed, how to fill their night. They would come up with ghost stories to tell each other all night. However, the establishment of not only 100 stories, Monogatari, Hyaku Monogatari, but the idea of a ghost story was also established in the Edo period by a rakugo performer, Shozo Hayashiya, who is also in this movie.
Yeah. And
now,
who was played by the 8th generation Hayashiya as well.
Correct. The 8th generation of Shozo Hayashiya, to be exact, because the Hayashiya name is a level of rakugo performer that you can achieve. Another member of this specific level of rakugo performer is Shinpei Hayashiya, director of Riga, God Riga versus King Oga, and War of the Ninja Monsters, Zeiram versus Gora. Now, Shozo Hayashiya is the one who founded the name of Hayashiya. He is the beginning. And he was actually nicknamed Kaidan no Shozo, which is ghost stories Shozo, right?
Yeah.
And this was because he was friends with a man named Tsuruya Nonboku, who created the story of Yotsuya Kaidan, or the ghost story of Yotsuya, which I have talked about at length on this show plenty of times. Now, these two men are the ones who established the idea of the ghost story genre. Hayashiya-san would go around Japan performing Hyaku Monogatari for people, while Nonboku created Yotsuya Kaidan and a couple of other stories. And these stories spread throughout Japan, and from that built off more and more ghost stories. Daiei alone has, I think, a series of 15 ghost story movies. I think Toei also has a ghost story series, and then there's also a ton of TV shows that are ghost story based. And all of it can be traced back to this. So the interesting thing about 100 Monsters is it's a look at the beginning of ghost stories. And it's establishing where those came from, and it came from yokai. Yokai are some of the oldest variations of ghosts in a way. They're not really ghosts. They're creatures. If you define the term yokai, it's like mysterious, bewitching creatures.
Right.
Which in of itself, it's weird because there is no way to describe it, and that's what makes it mysterious.
Right. I mean, the thing is that a yokai can be almost anything. I mean, that's why, there's debate about yurei and whether or not that is its own, subset of yokai.
Mm-hmm.
And then even with some yokai, there's, the kappa or the rokubo. There's various variants of them, in the Kappa's case, there's a lot of like different regional variants of different names. For Rokubo, there's a Nuke, I might have said that, which is like a headless variant of that yokai.
Mm-hmm. Right, and there's even, as an example, there is the Oshiro Baba, which is translates to face powdered hag. That is a yokai in this film as well. It's a yokai who appears as a woman who walks with a cane and bottle of sake, wearing a straw hat, and likes to scare off people. And some accounts have described it as a variation of the Yuki Onna, which is the Snow Woman, which Daiei in 1968 did a film for Yuki Onna. That story also appears in Lafcadio Hearn's Kaidan, or Ghost Stories, which became a film in 1965 as Kwaidan from Toho. And like I said, in that film, they do have the Yuki Onna appears in that. But there's also other ghost stories in that film, which if you haven't watched Kwaidan, beautiful film. Love it. It is amazing. But you do see, especially here, like in Kwaidan, there's a lot of, and those fall under the yurei, I believe. I believe the Yuki Onna is more of a yurei than a yokai herself. But she has been featured as a yokai. She was in the Great Yokai War Guardians as a yokai.
Mm.
So, but even then, like in that film in Guardians, they have Frankenstein and Dracula and the Yeti, and they attend the yokai meetings in the film, which, goes back to the whole concept of, yokai can kind of be anything. And if you were to look at yokai in a modern perspective, then I think by all accounts, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, the Yeti, the Skunk Ape, the Bunyip, the Chupacabra, the Sasquatch, Yeti, all of that would classify, Mothman, would classify as a yokai. Just a foreign example of that. But see, it's even interesting there, like in other cultures, the idea of yokai are there, but they're labeled as other things. The like champ monster, it's all more like cryptids. I guess you could say the modern term for yokai would be a cryptid.
The English term.
English term, yeah. But I think that's kind of interesting,
Yeah. Speaking of the yokai, the monsters in this film were created by X Production, led by Masao Yagi, whom had previously worked on various other Daiei films, and the Yagi brothers also have their background with Toho Productions as well. Can't forget that.
Right, yeah, because they go back all the way to the original 1954 Godzilla.
Yeah. And they based a lot of their designs off the previously mentioned Shigeru Mizuki's artwork from various shonen magazines, as well as also reusing some props and items from the Akado Suzunosuke series and Buddha, as we previously mentioned.
Right. Now, I do know that for the umbrella yokai, I'll refer to him because that's a little easier than constantly saying the name
Karakasa Koso?
Yes. That took about 30 days to make as a puppet. So they spent a lot of time working on these suits and puppets to make them appear alive.
Like a lot of different looking guys. And for what it's worth, the effects in this film actually do look really, really good, honestly.
Mm-hmm. I think the idea of yokai they're supposed to look off, I think also helps as well.
Yeah. But even then, I'd say there's just genuinely like really well done effects work that is just a lot of times shot in really clever ways, particularly thinking of the Roku Rokubo sequence.
Oh yeah.
Like that legitimately looks fantastic.
Now, I don't want to get too much into the film yet, but I do have a lot of... I agree with you there, and there's a lot of instances of beautiful cinematography throughout the film.
And it, from the image I've seen from Great Yokai War, it also looks better than the CG Roku Rokubo.
From the 2018 film?
The 2005 film.
Oh, yes.
So, it looks better than a film made about 40 years later, so take that for what you will. Also, I meant Roku Rokubi, my bad. Kubi is Nick. With that all being said, is there anything else you want to mention before we get into the film?
Well, prior to production, a monk actually went to Dai and performed Hayako Monogatari for the production team. And they performed the ritual and everything. And when they did their prayers, they wished for a safe production and a good reception, which I thought was pretty fun.
I mean, that was a bit of a common tradition. I don't know. Is it still done where like they'll have like a Shinto ritual, like a blessing for film productions nowadays in Japan?
I don't know. I could ask somebody. I know somebody.
With that being said, getting into the film, we start in the beautiful, illuminated night of a forest.
Oh my god! It's funny you bring that up because, like, my first note is the lighting in this opening is beautiful.
Right. I mean, just that first establishing shot showing the moon and all that. The framing is just really nice and beautiful.
Something that I really appreciate about, and this is a blanket statement for a lot of these Japanese ghost story Edo period films, the lighting is always it's not natural, right? It's not lit up like it would be realistically like in a Zatoichi movie. The way it's lit up though is weirdly or at home. It's like it's perfect. This is what I would expect. And it's something that as time has gone on, people have kind of left this soundstage look of this, because it's all shot on the soundstage, right? They're not actually out in the woods.
Yeah.
But as time has gone on, people have kind of regressed to a more realistic look, an artificial realism with lighting and whatnot. Whereas in these, especially these 1960s films like Kwaidan and this film's especially, it's very theatrical, which goes back to its kabuki and rakugo performance origins, right? Which, in that case, it makes sense. It works. And this is something I miss from like modern day, Japanese horror films, is this beautifully lit, like the face is perfectly lit, but nothing else is.
Right.
That stuff is just really memorable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Lighting is something I kind of take issue with within a fair bit of modern Japanese horror.
A lot of films like to try to make it a little too dark.
That, or it's kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like this almost too clean, too bright, but too even look, I guess. Kind of flat. I don't know. That's neither here nor there now, anyways.
Right, yeah. But speaking of lighting, we get the introduction to our first yokai during this sequence, which is the Tsuchikorobi. And again, the lighting is like perfect on. It's got a singular eye. It's this giant, like, hairy creature, but its eye is perfectly lit in this scene, and I just love it.
And I like how the creature otherwise is pretty much just backlit as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they utilize. I mean, throughout this whole film, the lighting is just perfect. The lighting direction, and it goes back again. It's very theatrical. The lighting direction in this film is phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal.
Right, and this attack we're seeing is soon revealed to be a story being told in one of the Hyaku Monogatari rituals.
And I love this film does a great job, and this establishes it like early on. You know, the Martin Scorsese 3-minute, you know, you have 3 minutes to get your audience. If you don't, you've lost them. Within the first 2 minutes, you get a yokai. And then you're revealed that this is actually all being told as a story. And again, the lighting, the way it's set up, like there's overhead lighting on all of our characters. And as you go back, it's just a black room. You can't see a lot. Very theatrical. But it
right, but the light still feels motivated by the candles as well.
Yes, it does. And there's an uneasiness to this, you know, and everybody who is watching this film, you know, it is subtitled. There's no dub, so it's presumably going to be an older audience, can remember, you know, those nights as a child sitting in bed hearing scary stories. You know, the idea of telling scary stories to each other is a concept that is like just a part of the human.
I mean, it transcends cultures.
It does. And that is something that, you know, is both unsettling, but also, again, welcoming. It's very at home. So within the first 3 minutes of this film, the director has given you a yokai, given you a yokai attack, established an eerie mood, and thrown a wrench into what you think is true because you're actually hearing this story. And at the current moment in this film's progression, you don't really know if that's a true story or not. That's the whole thing about a story, is what is true and what is not. Where does fact become fiction and where is fiction fact? And this film showcases people on both ends of that, who believe all the yokai and who don't believe it. And eventually we do find out the true answer, which, spoiler alert, is the yokai do exist. And so within the first 3 minutes, this film has officially confused its audience, made its audience feel at home, scared its audience, and interested its audience.
Mm-hmm.
Which is amazing. This is great storytelling, which is very ironic, right? Because it's a story about storytelling. It's a great first 3 minutes.
And I mean, from like, just for me as well, it's just really interesting seeing this sort of just this interesting bit of culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, you mentioned the candlelight, and I want to bring that up. Rex, if you watch the film, you want to know when the candle goes out?
When?
3 minutes exact. At the 3 minute mark, that is when the screen is black. So I think that also speaks to it as well, is the film at the 3 minute mark leaves you in the dark, literally. And you have to stick around to find out more.
Yeah. Following this, we get our title card of Yokai Hyaku Monogatari and transition into the main part of our story, where we're introduced to our some of our. It's more of an ensemble cast rather than. There is a protagonist of sorts, but he's not introduced until a bit later. We're introduced.
I wouldn't even say we have a protagonist.
I feel like Yasutaro is the closest thing to a protagonist in the film.
I see. I feel like this film, one of the biggest issues of this film is it very much doesn't feel like there's a through line in the narrative.
I don't know. I don't know if I wouldn't go as far as to say that.
Well, because there's a lot of different things going on. You know, we opened up with this story from this character who is basically irrelevant for the rest of the story. We have our main story of like the shrine getting destroyed. And then we jump back and forth from the villains to the heroes. And then we go back to hear another story. So it's one of those things where there's like two storylines going at once that start off at the same point and by the end are back together. But it is at points a little odd in the way it tells its story, I will say.
I don't know. I don't know. For me, this from the longer this film goes along, the more I realize, and the more it made sense when I learned afterwards that this is this film is made by a lot of the crew of DiManna.
Yes,
including the writer.
Yes,
because narratively it is very similar to DiManna.
Yeah, it is 100%.
Even with it kind of focusing on a more of an ensemble cast rather than necessarily a developed, like a really developed protagonist. Which, to be fair, from what I understand, like Eastern and Japanese stories do tend to focus more on ensembles rather than Western stories, which are more focused on an individual.
Right.
But yeah, and this film does end up having very similar thematic elements to the DiManna series, as gets established pretty soon after we're introduced to Gohei and Okiku, whom end up being confronted by the men working under a man named Tajimaya, whom is taking over a shrine so that he can demolish it and replace it with a brothel.
Which is very ironic because one of the yokai that appears in this film actually frequently appears. It's actually the long black-haired woman I was referring to. She frequently in folklore appears in brothels. So in a way, he's enticing the yokai to come. Either way that you go about this, it's just going to end in bad news for him, and I think that's really cool. And if you know that going in, like the origins of the yokai, this film is a lot more fun to just kind of watch the impending doom, similar to that of how if you watch a DiManna film, you know that DiManna's coming. It's just that impending doom of like, when will he come?
Right.
But getting back into the plot here, now, as you've established, we open with this introduction. We're established to the problem of the shrine and whatnot.
And the tenement house also being taken over by Tajimaya.
And the question of, like, can they do this? Has it happened? Because our characters don't know what the current situation and circumstances of this whole ordeal is. They say they're going to destroy the buildings, build a brothel, but they don't believe that, right? So then the next point in the film is what is truly happening. If it's a Zatoichi movie, more than likely the dude's just doing it. He doesn't have that power. He's just kind of going with it. But this film does follow a similar plot line with corrupt political figures. That's something that frequently occurs in the Zatoichi series, where the magistrate and the lords, I believe, is he a lord or is he a
which one? Tajimaya or
Tajimaya? Is he a lord or is he a
I don't think he's a lord
A
or
Yakuza.
a magistrate. He wouldn't be a Yakuza, but he's obviously working on the magistrate Buzen, who we are introduced to a little bit later.
Which, as soon as the establishment of the problem is put out, we jump to Tajimaya learning that the magistrate Bunzen is waiting for him at his house, and so he goes and meets Buzen, and they discuss their trade ordeals going on, which he establishes that he's been able to do more this year than previous years, that he's actually prospering very well, and that his land that he wants has been approved, which is a bunch of obscure temples throughout the land.
During this sequence, we were also introduced to our comic relief character, Shinichi.
Now, do you think it's kind of interesting how this film establishes that the corrupt government officials that are taking the land from the people are the bad ones? I mean, very similar to Daimajin, that like try to take over land and then they like demolish things and build what they want. And how they're the villains, and then you look at a film like Gamera versus Gyaos, where the government's taking the land from the villagers and they're the heroes.
Man, what government funding does to a movie. maybe that was the real difference between Dai Kyoto and Dai Tokyo. Kyoto had morals.
I mean, they were the more prestigious company, the ones behind Rashomon, Ogetsu, and Gate of Hell. So, now, jumping back into the plot here, following this, we have our villagers meeting with the village head, Jinbei, right? That's his name?
Yeah. Okiku's father.
And they're talking about if it's true or not. They're making sure that they don't believe it's true, and they believe that they're just saying that to say that. And so they talk to him, which...
Unfortunately, he reveals that it is in fact true. He owes Tajimaya 30 pieces... 30, what was it, Rio?
30 Rio, yep. And it was at this point in the film where I started to really feel the Zatoichi influences. Because, it's pretty typical in a Zatoichi film to have... Zatoichi comes across somebody who owes a lord or a Yakuza boss money, and so he kills like his sister or something and now lives alone and sad.
Right. Yeah, it is that sort of typical Jidaigeki type story of oppression. Very much similar to Daimajin, which was by the same writer as this film.
Right, yeah, both. I mean, this film very much has those origins of Zatoichi and Daimajin. Now, something that's very interesting too is the way that the film is laid out is more in line with like the Zatoichi films of the time. If you look at them, so the way that Daimajin was, Daimajin's not in the film until the very last 10 minutes or so. But that was also very similar to how like the Zatoichi films of the time were. Zatoichi wouldn't really get into a sword fight until the very end, and then you'd have the great sword fight at the end, and then that would be it. Whereas by 1968, we're at this point, I want to say they were about 16, 17 Zatoichi films in. They had started to sprinkle it out throughout the entire film. At the beginning of this film, we get a little bit of yokai, and then here at about the 30-minute mark, there's some more yokai, and then at the very end, there's a lot of yokai, which is a lot similar to how the Zatoichi films were, how they would open up with a little sword fight, and then you get a little teasing throughout the film, and then at the very end you had the grand sword fight with Zatoichi and the 50 people of the Yakuza or whatever. And so I can, to me, like, as thankfully I've been watching the Zatoichi films, because to me, I really saw the parallels to the Zatoichi films of the time. while also the similar themes and even the story, how it's set up to Daimajin, there's a lot of that in this film.
Yeah. Oh yeah, structurally this feels this feels like it could easily just be another like a Daimajin sequel, essentially.
Right. And honestly, and this was something I didn't really think about until just now while we're talking. I really understand why, especially after my rewatch here of this film. I really understand why Katakawa has tried to put Daimajin into the yokai universe instead of like having them separate.
I mean, yeah, story-wise, this film in particular is very similar. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, in the Yokai Guardians case, to be fair, it isn't exactly the first time Daimajin's necessarily fought a yokai or been in had yokai in.
That's true, because doesn't Daimajin canon, isn't that just yokai?
Yeah, pretty much. Daimajin fights like a giant yokai in it, and most of the antagonists are yokai.
See,
but even then, in the first Daimajin, you kind of have a yokai-esque scene in the forest where there's like those eyes in the forest.
Yeah, you have that. And then also, whenever right before Daimajin appears, you have that floating light, that fire that floats down from the sky. I don't think it does anything. I think it just kind of floats there, it terrorizing and scaring the people below. But that is straight up just the fire yokai, like it looks just like that. Also, another interesting thing, if we're talking about Daimajin parallels, this was something I wanted to bring up. So the yokai, the Noperabo, the faceless monk. So they, obviously they have no face, right? That's their whole thing, and their whole thing is to like scare the humans, right? So the way that because in the film they even showcase this where they have their face and then they can turn to no face. The way they do that in some stories is they swipe their hand across their face, like playing peekaboo,
like Daimajin does.
Like, yes. And I thought that was such a cool thing. How like Daimajin does that, where like his fists go in front of his face and he goes from Bujin to Daimajin. And that was so cool. I was like, oh, there's like another little yokai ism to the Daimajin character, because that was not something from the Golem. The Golem did not have the whole like swiping of the face. It just had the change from the statue to the Golem. And so now the yokai influence there probably is even more obvious. So that just makes Daimajin even cooler and stands out from just being a Legolem knockoff. It's Legolem. It's a Jewish character blended with Japanese folklore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really cool idea. See, even now we're still diving into more of the influences of Daimajin, and we're not even on the Daimajin film anymore.
Yeah. But soon following this scene, after the villagers learn this truth, they also soon discover that Gohei has been killed.
Right. And during all of this, the village leader says that he'll request a postponement, and he'll do his best to like delay it so he can pay it off. So there's just kind of tragedy after tragedy here with our characters. Now, this is where we transition following Gohei's death. This was where I noticed something that, we can talk about it. This is where we really start to get the two different stories, the villain story and our hero story.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I noticed in the film is the way that it's laid out, and this film does a... Actually, I'll bring that up. I'll bring it up once we get past this sequence, actually, because it'll make more sense following this. Because what we go from this funeral, from Gohei's death, to the introduction of the Rakugo scene, which it starts off with our villain character Tajimaya explaining that they are going to have a slightly different style of entertainment during this meal than they would traditionally have.
Mm-hmm.
So they bring in some shutters and they lay out a red carpet. Now, interestingly enough, on the shutters are illustrations of yokai. And this was actually influenced by the imperial paintings of the Parade of 100 Demons that I was talking about earlier. This was directly influenced by that. And after they get everything set up, we're introduced to Shozo Hayashiya, who is in this movie, played by the 8th generation Shozo Hayashiya, which I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they end up performing the Hyaku Monogatari performance of sorts.
Right. And it made so much more sense when I learned that this is a Rakugo performance and they had a Rakugo performer perform it, because the way that he does it, and the way he articulates the story and the way that he performs it is very entertaining. Mm-hmm. And it's a very ominous scene, but it very much reminds me of something like Koichi the Earless in Kwaidan. In that movie, Koichi, or Hoichi the Earless is this biwa player that retells the story of this battle, and the souls of the people who died from that battle bring him to the other world to perform this song for him. And he does, it's a the reason they bring him is because of how beautiful he does it and how well he does. And so, it kind of reminds me of that here with the establishment of Shozo Hayashiya as he tells us one of the stories.
Yeah, during which this is also intercut with the funeral procession for Gohei by the villagers.
Which this was definitely done on purpose, right? They're having a funeral while they're having a party.
Yeah, it's an interesting contrast between the two classes.
A dramatic irony, I believe, is what it would fall under.
Yes.
They're both performing rituals. One of them's a funeral while the other one is more of an entertaining ritual that they end up discarding at the end.
When we cut back to Hayashiya, he is telling us the 100th story, which ends up being an adaptation of the Oitekebori.
Right, and before we even go into that, we get some beautiful shots of the way the lighting is done here is there's a spotlight on Hayashiya-san, whereas everybody around him is more in natural lighting or the floodlight from that spotlight, which ends up making a very it really hones in on where you should be focusing, but gives another very theatrical lighting.
Very eerie and atmospheric image.
Yeah, I remember you and I had been talking, and you brought up the silhouette before we jump into that story of Hayashiya-san.
Yeah, I specifically noticed how it highlights specifically one of his eyes, almost making himself look like a yokai just by this sort of unnatural look that the light gives him.
Right, and that with it's silhouetted, right? And the way that his hair is done up, it almost looks like his forehead is deformed. And it ends up looking really eerie. And it's really well done. And I love the fact that even though his face is what's in focus here, and also the focus in this film, I don't know if they somehow did a digital focus because it's on point where the camera lens needs to be focused. But just outside of focus, you can see that last candle. Like, that is meant to be the other, like, area that your eye's drawn to is the singular final candle, which is just beautiful staging in terms of how they've shot this scene.
We transition into the story of Oitikabori with the two fishermen.
Now, do you want me to read I've got the story plus kind of 3 variations on the ending. Do you want me to go ahead and read that?
Go ahead.
So before I do, just to reestablish, this is taken from the 7 Wonders of Honjo and was frequently used in Rakugo performances, which makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because, I mean, we're watching a Rakugo performance. Now, the story goes as one night, 2 fishermen were fishing in a particular spot in Hongo at sunset. They noticed that they were catching more fish than usual. So they fished until they filled up both of their baskets. They packed up and got ready to return home. As they got ready to leave, they heard a voice say, "Drop it, leave it." Now, the reason for that phrase specifically is that is actually what Oiteke Bori means. That is that statement is when you translate it, drop it, leave it. Now, this is where the story deviates. One variation says both fishermen drop their baskets and run. Returning later, they find out that their baskets are empty. Another variation says both fishermen run home with the baskets, but upon returning home, their baskets are empty. And then the final and most gruesome of these variations is one fisherman drops his basket, the other doesn't. While running home, the one who didn't drop his basket is grabbed by a ghostly hand and dragged into the water, never to be seen or heard from again.
Right. But this version of the story almost seems to take more influence, the way it's told in the film, almost seems to take a little bit more influence from another version of the story where after they hear the leave it voice but eventually go on their own way, other yokai are actually summoned. As in the way it's told in this scene, we get the fishermen, after they come home, one of their wives ends up turning into a rokurokubi.
Right. It's also interesting to note that in this variation, the fishermen are actually samurai. Mm-hmm. To kind of add a level of like, oh, these guys, like, they can fight, they can, like, kill, they've probably killed tons of people before. I think that's a very intelligent alteration to give them more strength than you would traditionally see in this story. I think that also just adds a level of, oh, they can, like, whatever is about to attack them is pretty strong.
And no, this is an effective scene. Like, this is probably my favorite scene in the movie when the Rokurokubi shows up, and I think it's also, she is generally like the best effect in the movie as well. Particularly the shot of her behind like the paper wall.
Yeah, I don't know if I would put this as like my top like scene in the film, but it's definitely one of the best ones. It's definitely very effective. It's important to note that of the main yokai, the director wanted to highlight the Rokurokubi, the long-necked woman, was one of the main yokai that he wanted to highlight. And all of the yokai, he did end up getting good sequences in this film, which I'll touch on as we get there. Now, there's some interesting aspects to the Rokurokubi character that they bring into this version of the story. So, it's just, the monk says to not get the fish, to go home, right? And then they end up taking the fish. They go home and they meet their wife, right? Or one of them meets their wife. They're not married to the same woman, I guess. But they're preparing dinner with this fish. But there's an issue with the fish that leads to them not being able to use it, correct? Or is it just the blood?
I'm pretty sure it's just the blood, yeah. Because the fish tastes good, actually, from what I remember, because one of them eats it.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting because it's that the blood won't come off, correct?
Yeah, the wife can't wipe the blood off her hands.
But she, goes off to try and get it figured out. And when she goes off, now bear in mind this is after the sun goes down, we get some more dramatic lighting throughout this whole scene, which this whole scene has some beautiful lighting. It very much reminds me of in Kwai-Don, the Yuki Onna, the way that the light hits her face. But it was not just Kwai-Don. A lot of Japanese films at this time, anytime the woman monster ghost started doing ghost-like things, they would really do an underlight on her face and do close-ups or her looking off on the side or something. And it always looks really good.
I mean, it's a very common and very effective, creepy visual.
Mm-hmm. Now, the reason that she becomes a Rokurokubi is more so, it falls in line with the lore behind the yokai, because they can only do it at night. It happens at night, right? But traditionally in the Rokurokubi storyline, it's only the women that can do it. So any man that does something wrong, whatever that curse is, if it's a Rokurokubi curse, it would fall upon their wives or their mothers or whoever their spouse or close female person was. That would be the one that would turn into Rokurokubi, and they would be cursed with that forever.
Though it wasn't always necessarily as malicious as it's portrayed here.
Right. I remember there was one story where this man killed his wife, and he ended up staying at an inn and ended up sleeping with the inn's daughter. And then she turned out to be a Rokurokubi, but she didn't kill him, but he was scared enough the next morning to admit that he had killed his wife, and then the inn master reveals that he also killed his wife. So, and that goes back to the whole thing that traditionally in yokai stories, they're not meant to be deadly creatures. They're not supposed to kill you. They're just supposed to give you a good scare.
Right.
Now, since we're talking about the scene, I love the shot of the long-necked woman in front of the paper wall.
Yeah, as I said, that's an amazing shot.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And then we get a really great couple of, I think it's about a minute long or so, this whole sequence with the samurai dealing with the Rokurokubi, which is really effective and looks really good. It's definitely better than its CGI counterparts in the Great Yokai War.
Yeah, from the images I've seen, yeah, for a movie made about 40 years before, it looks 100 times better. But yes, she seemingly kills them, but it is later revealed that by the monk who encounters the real wife, that they had actually seemingly died from a lightning strike.
Which, the way I interpreted that was, later on in the film, we also see another sequence where the yokai get our main villain to hallucinate what he's actually seeing versus what's actually there. And so I kind of interpreted it as that, as they didn't kill the samurai, but they put the samurai into a situation where they thought they were seeing what they were seeing, but in all reality, that wasn't the case. Because if I remember correctly, the younger samurai just kind of passes out. He never interacts with the Rokurokubi. which doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of like the context of her killing them. But it would make more sense if like they both died in lightning.
I mean, the thing is, with folk stories like these, you're not always meant to take everything so literally as well. And I think the ambiguousness here,
it is ambiguous.
I guess ambiguousness in a sense, kind of supports that.
Actually,
idea.
While I was researching for 100 Monsters today, I actually put on a translated Haiku Monogatari video that had 100 stories in it. And if I remember correctly, traditionally in all of the stories, it ended on kind of like a who really knows what happened, but these were the events that transpired. And it's supposed to leave it ambiguous for the human mind, because the human mind does see things 10 times more scarier than they actually are. So it's supposed to let your imagination run wild and make you stay up at night fearing about, what if my mother is a Rokurokubi and I'm gonna, be attacked by it. Stuff like that.
Right. But this concludes the 100 stories told by Hayashiya. He goes to try and perform the ritual to prevent the apparition from appearing, but Tajimaya shuts him down as just a superstitious idiot.
And he does say that like he'll do his own ritual, but this whole sequence is very interesting because in a way I think it kind of mimics what was going on with the idea of yokai, because here we have, Haiku Monogatari, a ritual that's supposed to end with you praying and expelling the ghost, right? Whereas here he's told off, he's told no. But the reasoning, it's because he was supposed to only be there for entertainment, not to do the ritual. And it's very much similar to how like yokai were banned. You couldn't talk about yokai, you couldn't believe in yokai. Yokai were not supposed to be a thing. It's also very similar to the opening of Daimajin, where the village has the fire festival to appease the mighty Bujin so he does not get angry, and the lords.
I mean, essentially what they're doing here is we're reinforcing the oppressiveness of Tajimaya and by extension,
Right.
Buzen, the magistrate.
Now, I do think it's very interesting here because this essentially makes it so that the problems in the film are caused more so by their ignorance to the ritual than like the shrine and the tenant's house, which I struggle with a little bit because it's like, okay, the shrine and the house are like the main problem for our hero characters, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if they get destroyed or not because it has no impact on the yokai. The yokai come because of the villains being ignorant, not because they're destroying the shrine. So in a way, I feel like it almost mutes the point of the shrine getting destroyed.
Not really. I mean, the shrine is the dramatic tension of the film, and really, most of the yokai that show up really are more nuisances to the characters rather than outright, like, particularly like killing.
That is true. There are a couple that are like meant to be like killers that are seen, but you are correct. Most of the ones in here are meant to just be nuisances to our characters. I don't know. It just because they do end up destroying the shrine. The shrine gets destroyed, but it
right. But I think that's more for dramatic tension. It's like, whoa, they're halfway through. They've destroyed one thing. Next is a tenement house, and they've already and now that they've proven that the shrine's done. Oh no, just that dramatic tension.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I feel like they could have maybe done something a little differently. I don't know. It's not like, oh my god, this ruins the film. It's just like, if you think about it, I feel like you could ask some questions with it. Now, going back into the scene, this is where he also says that he's got lucky charms for all of the people in the room for this ritual, which end up just being bundles of Ryu. And following this, we get... I don't remember exactly, but the way I remember it is they discover that something is missing, and they look inside the party room, and they find...
Yasutaro.
The way I interpret it was they were missing maybe a bundle of Ryu, which would have been about 30, I think, if I'm remembering correctly from Zatoichi.
Yeah, it might have been that. I just remember reading it as someone was missing and Yasutaro just took their place, but you could also you're probably more right in all honesty.
They look around and they discover him, and then they start moving in on him, which I do think it's very interesting here, because the scene that would have been in like a Zatoichi movie following all of this would have been a very long, drawn-out fight between Zatoichi and, the lords and whatnot. Here, they approach him, like they know that he's there. They stop him, and they threaten him, and they try to get him. And he just quickly plays defense and runs off here. And I kind of applaud it for going a different route than like a stand-up at the villain's headquarters, kind of that stereotypical, oh, the hero's inside now, and then he gets set back, and then he has to come back later. I think that's a good way that they flip it. And it also, for the rest of the film following this, our villains are just kind of looking. They're destroying the shrine in the house, but they're also looking for him now. That's their next objective, is to locate him.
Yeah. During their efforts, they end up having an encounter with the Oitekebori just after this. They do,
yes. Yeah, and I do love this sequence with the lantern. The way it's a very dark sequence, only lit by what the lantern would be. And I think this is a really cool scene, because the way that the lantern morphs into the Obake no Chochin is really cool. Like it opens up to have that mouth looking piece with the kanji character looking like an eyeball. I think that's really well executed. This is some really cool effects here. Now, just to kind of dive into a little the history of the lantern ghost, it is an old lantern that splits into two with the mouth and the eyeball. But outside of that, it also appeared in Gege no Kitaro by Shigeru Mizuki. It was in that manga. But they actually don't know the origins of where this came from. They said it possibly could have just been for like children's paintings and stories. But there is a story that says that the lantern ghosts suck the souls of the people that they're scaring. So perhaps these people's souls are being sucked out while the lantern scares them.
How unfortunate. Following this, we go to Jinbei's further pleas with Tajimaya to delay the demolition of the shrine and tenement house. His pleas are largely in vain, but Tajimaya does offer the ultimatum of Jinbei giving over his daughter,
right? Which
is later revealed to be Tajimaya's offering to the magistrate.
Which this whole scene very much reminds me again of like a Zatoichi plotline. This is something that's basically taken straight out of a couple Zatoichi movies, where the daughter of the person who's, in debt is told, give me your daughter. And then it ends up he's gets killed or something, and the daughter gets offered anyway, and Zatoichi has to save her.
Meanwhile, cutting back to Tajimaya's son, Shinichi, he ends up having a little encounter with the umbrella.
Yeah, here we get a pretty unique sequence where we get some animation of one of the Karakase Kozos that he's drawn on his wall, which he seemingly has a obsession for, I guess.
Yeah, which is established in an earlier scene.
Right. And I enjoy seeing the Karakase Kozo in here, because this film does a great job at establishing that it's not a violent or scary creature per se. It's more of just like an obnoxious monster that appears throughout. And the puppet here is so perfect. I enjoy it very much. And
it suits the comedic tones of the scene.
Yeah, no, the fact that they have Shinichi being the character that interacts with it, I think just adds to that fact that it works out perfectly. Now, it's also important to note that the Karakase Kozo is the second of the character of the yokai that I mentioned that the director wanted highlighted specifically. So this is like its shining sequence is during this. It does show up again.
Oh, it appears a couple of times. But like
this is like its main like solo. It's here. It's getting its own screen time.
Mm. Meanwhile, the next morning, after escaping an encounter with the Tajimaya's men, Yasutaro ends up meeting up with his, I guess, love interest?
Yeah.
It was kind of vaguely set up earlier. I picked up on it earlier. Like during his introduction scene, you can kind of pick up on it, but it's
and it doesn't really get elaborated.
This isn't. It's kind of just a background element that I don't even think is necessarily a flaw. It's just kind of I wish it got more focus, because I wish there was more to Yasutaro.
Yeah, because like after
I think that's my issue
because after like his first interaction with the villains, like at his home, he just kind of comes and goes. He's very much a side character that really doesn't do a lot and is just kind of there.
I mean, the thing is, he's positioned in this sort of protagonist-esque role, but a lot of his actions end up being half off screen. Especially like his infiltration, for example. Like, we don't realize he's infiltrated
until everybody else does.
Tajimaya's.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's something that should be, I would think, would be a little more showcased, kind of following him through this. And I think that's honestly one of the character aspect. Like, this film is supposed to be character driven.
I mean, the thing is, it is a more ensemble story about a collective group. It is about the village more than a singular protagonist. But like, for yours and my more Western sensibilities, where our cultures are more individually focused, I feel like having more of a focus on Yasutaro would work better for our sensibilities.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, so following all this, we get our village head heading back from trying to work out that deal, right?
Yeah, and getting assassinated in the process by one of Tajimaya's men.
And then we get our, back at the village, they're talking about where is he, that typical stereotype, he's not back yet. Where could he be? Oh no.
Yeah. They go to Tajimaya's men, but they deny having ever seen him. But Okiku eventually finds her father's corpse in the water.
Both of them end up going back the same route that her father. Yeah, both of them go back the same route that her father was on, and he miraculously floats up. I kind of took that as like maybe the yokai did that. What do you think? That's being a little too?
I didn't think much of it,
but it's very much revealed that he is dead.
Right. And during their mourning, Tajimaya's men end up showing up to begin their takeover, essentially. The villagers try to rebel, but eventually Okiku gives in and tries to stop this by meeting with Tajimaya and giving herself to Tajimaya for the safety of the village and as well as the shrine and tenement house.
Right. Yeah. This whole sequence is very much it falls in line with what you would typically see in these kind of Jedi Geki films. And Daimajin, yeah, where there's a deal made and then the deal's broken. You know, these people are awful human beings. You know,
right.
As you mentioned, they go on to destroy the shrine, which we see those umbrellas again, which I believe I mentioned earlier about how these umbrellas probably end up becoming more Karakasa Kozos because, that's the whole storyline of them, which, again, I think is pretty cool. I also like how the children, like the moment they see that the shrine's getting destroyed, they run away because they know that bad things are about to happen. I think that's very... when you see children running, like, there's something bad, because children are going to be kind of the last ones to run sometimes because of curiosity. And then we get the whole rebellion between the villagers and the men. And they toss these people around like they're rag dolls. It's kind of brutal how badly the villagers get beat up here.
Meanwhile, Buzen tries wooing Okiku, but is interrupted by Yasutaro's rescue.
Which I guess this is kind of the beginning. This is like the rising action to our climax, which following this we do get the destruction of the shrine. And this was where, to me, it was like, oh my god, the Daimajin influences are very much felt because the sky turns green.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Yeah.
And no, you've got the red lighting as well, like for the sky alongside the green light.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the climax of Daimajin.
Yeah, it's like right before the Daimajin comes, that whole sequence with the sky. Like we get that here. They end up a spear comes down and kills one of the men. Which do we ever? I don't think it's really a step. Like, is this because they destroyed the shrine?
Maybe, I don't know. It could be that. It could be because of the ritual prior. It's not really established. But I don't think it necessarily matters either.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily a flaw in the storytelling. It's more just karma, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier how this kind of follows the idea of Buddhism, kind of like if you do good things, like good things will come. If you do bad things will come. And how this film, like the villains, the approach isn't necessarily that them destroying the shrine leads to the yokai coming. It's more in line with them doing these bad things is what leads to their demise. And going back to the sky real quick, I love the painted matte skies. Like that is just such a beautiful image. I think that stuff is something that I dearly miss in modern films.
And the visuals of the Noperabo? I'm butchering that, I know.
Noperabo.
There you
go.
The Noperabo.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the Noperabo, now that is the third of 4 yokai that the director wanted to highlight here. It's the yokai with no face, right? Their whole thing is they like to scare humans. They often appear on dark roads with their back turned to whoever they're trying to scare. They first have a face and then it disappears and they scare people. And they'll often like follow a person back to their house and like impersonate their wife or whatever, just to get a good scare in. Now, an interesting thing about this yokai is the way that they transform from having a face to no face is they put their hand over, like they like a peekaboo, like they slide their face over their face. They slide their hand over their face.
DiManna.
Yeah, that, and so when I learned that, it was so cool because, you know, that in Legolem, you know, that's something that the golem doesn't like slide his face and he turns. It just, he changes from the statue to the golem. Whereas in DiManna, he does that thing with his fists to reveal, you know, from Bujin to Majin and Majin to Bujin. And so this is like more context, you know, we're not even talking about DiManna, but we're getting more context for it. You know, here we are, the kind of the yokai aspect of DiManna with like the changing of the faces. You know, it's really cool that it's basically a Jewish character, you know, the golem blended with Japanese folklore, which is why DiManna's so unique. And I really love that. You know, I think all of this kind of really adds to why Katakawa would later, blend DiManna in with yokai, with great yokai war guardians.
Yeah, especially given, like, you know, yokai had already been kind of like a thing in the DiManna series already.
Oh, that's right. With
obviously DiManna canon, the antagonists of that are yokai, like DiManna, and as well as the not Kamen Riders in that show, all fight a bunch of various different yokai in it. But also, even going back to the first DiManna film, there is that scene where the little kid has that encounter in the forest with the eye, which is very, very much like a yokai-like scene. I mean, at the beginning of this film, with the Tsuchi, you've got its name.
Tsuchikorobi.
Like, that scene in particular reminded me a lot of that scene with the eye in DiManna.
Yeah, and even in the sequence where we were talking about just now with DiManna's coming with like the red sky and whatnot, during that whole sequence there is that like that fireball that's like floating around, that's very much like the fireball yokai that exists in folklore. So like there's straight up a yokai in DiManna to a certain extent, kind of, you know, waving the DiManna's coming, kind of warning to all before he shows up.
Yeah. But following this, and after a little comedic sequence with Shinichi and the Karakase Kozo. After this comedic sequence, Jusuke, Tajimaya's the one henchman of Tajimaya that's still alive at this point, reports back to him about all his yokai encounters. Of course, Tajimaya doesn't believe him, but still goes out to investigate, which they end up seeing an old woman yokai.
Yeah, the Oshiro Baba, which is, I brought that up earlier, which is like another variation of possibly the Yuki-onna. But even following that, we get our fourth and final yokai that the director wanted to highlight with the Okubi, the giant head, which flies around harassing humans. Which this whole sequence was done with the giant blue screen. I don't know if it was the same one from DiManna, but it was done with the.
I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
Although I'd say it definitely looks like it's a little better here, I think.
Yeah. Now,
like there's still a bit of that like blue screen, like little bit of the blue edges, but it's not. I don't think it's as noticeable or as distracting as it was in DiManna. Like here, it's pretty unintrusive, all things considered.
I wholeheartherly agree. I think like the lighter opacity on the head also helps that otherworldliness. Now, after this, we get our villain here. Tajimaya kills one of his henchmen and then runs back into his house, which then we get a beautiful shot of the door closing without anybody there. And I think that's a really cool way to like lock us into this final segment of the film where we're trapped in his house.
Yeah. Following this, we cut to Buzen in his temple building residence.
I think it's just his house. It would be
his residence. Let's go with that.
Yeah, there's an actual term for it, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm blanking on it. He scolds his lackeys for their failures, but as Yasutaro appears, he finds Buzen talking to nobody.
And then we cut to him actually like what he's actually seeing, which then morph into what is my favorite sequence in the entire film. And that is all of the yokai are now in this room with Buzen, and he is they're jumping. Yeah, no, like they're jumping around, they're pushing him. He's like trying to attack them, but of course nothing's like it's doing nothing. And the thing about it is, and we've mentioned this actually earlier, these yokai are not here to kill him.
No.
They're here to scare him to death. And I love that because they're not actually attacking him. They're literally just haunting him.
Right. Yeah, he is in just a complete state of madness when he gets confronted by Yasutaro.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think one of the things I really love is this whole sequence really feels like a dreamlike sequence. It doesn't feel like it would happen in the real world. It feels like another world, like he's been transported to like a paralysis demon kind of dream.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, like a bit of folklore and fairy tale, the moral of the story comes out in this scene where Buzen is punished for his greed.
Mm-hmm. And, just as quickly as the yokai, he tries to escape, and the large-headed yokai is there to greet him. But like right after that, the yokai do leave him alone, but he's not okay. He's been scarred for the rest of his life, literally.
Right. So much so that he ends up, just like Tajimaya a few minutes ago, Buzen ends up killing one of his own men as well.
And that's because he has gone absolutely mad. He can't tell facts from or what's real life and what is not real.
Right.
And the acting here, especially, like the actor is just kind of lost in what's going on, and he does a brilliant job at just kind of portraying this lost person.
Right. During which he gets confronted by Yasutaro, who reveals himself as a member of the High Magistrate who's going to report Buzen for all his crimes.
Which, admittedly, I feel like is a little bit of a, like, out of nowhere kind of twist, I guess.
Yeah, it would work better if it was actually more set up.
Right. Like, if he was doing stuff in the background, everybody was like, what's he doing? Why is he doing this?
I mean, he kind of is, like, with him, like, infiltrating Tajimaya's, like, little gathering where we get the Hyaku Monogatari. But just if there was, like, more, like, direct hints or discussions or actual just setup in general, for Yasutaro, this reveal would work better and feel less out of nowhere.
Right. Also, another thing I love about this sequence is, there before we get the post yokai sequences, it's very loud, very chaotic. But when the yokai disappear, it gets very quiet, and there's not a lot of motion. And what motion is there is not a lot, and it's very eerie, and it adds to that haunting feel of the yokai. And it really helps make the yokai very memorable, and I really appreciate that.
But with seemingly nothing left to do, Buzen decides to commit seppuku.
Right, and this is, and I took this as probably due to the fact that like he knows that he's screwed, so he's like he's horrified, and then of course now he knows that like he can't get out of this. So he takes the easy route.
Following his death, the monsters all leave and go on their own little parade.
Right, which I love the yokai march. This ended up being a staple of every single yokai film. Like, this is how they end all of them. Spoiler alert. Is with like...
Thanks for the spoiler, bro.
The yokai march. There's just something about it that's very iconic. But I very much enjoy it a lot. And like I said, this was all based on that painting of the 100 Demon Parade, though it is in a different context, I guess.
Right. Or just just different interpretation of it.
We get to see all of the different yokai here, jumping for joy. I love this. This whole sequence is very... dare I say campy?
I wouldn't really say campy.
But do you get what I'm trying to say here?
Kind of.
Uncanny?
I don't know. I don't really know what word I would use to describe the sequence in particular.
But it's very enjoyable.
Yeah.
That's like, at the end of the day, no matter what that term is, it's a very enjoyable sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And they literally march off into the sunrise or the moonset.
Yeah, into dawn. Yeah,
and I think that's really cool. And they slowly disappear. It's a composite shot, of course, and they slowly disappear into nothing. Which I love that. I love that little like send off for our yokai.
Yeah, and as they disappear, the bodies of Tajimaya and Jusuke are found by the villagers, who ponder on what could have caused their deaths. And with that, the film ends.
Now, during the final sequence, it is stated that like there are things on Earth that man will never understand, which I think is a brilliant way to kind of summarize the yokai idea.
Right, exactly, yeah.
There are just things on the Earth that we will never understand, and like you said, that's it. The movie's over. So, with that, I guess, do you have any other notes you wanted to bring up? Or do we want to go into final thoughts?
Not that I don't think I've already mentioned.
Okay. So, are we into the final thoughts?
I do believe so, yes.
Awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and start us off here. I honestly, like, I know that I've, constantly been trying to, like, find problems with the film. But that's because, to be honest, I struggled having a lot of thoughts on this movie. And that's not a bad thing. There are just some movies that are so well done that when I watch them, I just don't have a lot to say because it's like, oh, this looks really good. This looks really good. This looks really good. Like, I would be just a repetitive, boring talking head at that rate. Like, there wouldn't be a lot for me to say. So I've been trying to kind of look at the film as we've been going through it. But I really think 100 Monsters is a ton of fun. I love Edo period ghost stories. I love the look of this film. It looks scary. I love the style. It's very kabuki-esque, which is, kind of the origins of a lot of horrors in kabuki play. And it's just beautiful. I mean, from the cinematography to the lighting to the design, the art design of the yokai, the sets, the costumes. Like, this is a really well-made film. And it baffles me that not many people talk about it in terms of like kaiju / tokusatsu from the Showa era.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that I definitely noticed when I was watching the film that I was really struggling to really write down any like strong opinions I had on the film other than like just my observation of the similarities to DiManna. And so in some regards, I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing for the film for me, is that there just wasn't, outside of some sequences with the yokai like the Roku Dokubi, there wasn't a lot from this film that really stood out terribly to me compared to, say, all three DiManna films that I recently like watched / rewatched in the first film's case, So while I definitely did, I did genuinely enjoy this film, and I am legitimately glad to have finally started this series. At the same time, it's just because the story in its ensemble structure that really doesn't give much in way of development to its characters. I feel like it's just not a terribly enough compelling narrative for me to really think much more of, other than, it's pretty good.
So let me ask you this. Shortly after 100 Monsters, obviously they went in to make Spook Warfare, which we will talk about later, but they also commissioned Noriaki Yuasa to direct the film The Snake Girl and the Silver-Haired Witch, which was a way lower budget film. It was a B movie through and through. And we've covered that film, and we both talked very highly of it. So I highly recommend anybody listening go check out that episode. But Rex, in the context of, another ghost story from Daiei in 1968, where does this kind of, like, compared to that, how does that kind of change your viewpoint?
Well, bear in mind, it has been a couple years since I
think 2 years, yeah.
Silverhead Witch, so
2 years this year.
Oh god. Just going off like my memory of that, I don't think I was as impressed with this film necessarily, but also in saying that, when I watched Snake Girl and the Silverhead Witch, I think I was less familiar. I was just in general less familiar with J-horror, and particularly with Showa J-horror.
Mm-hmm.
So that also could have very much impacted my experience. But then again, also, my Western sensibilities, obviously, Snake Girl and the Silverhead Witch is more focused on a singular protagonist compared to this film's ensemble cast. So perhaps that also contributed to my enjoyment of Snake Girl.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Snake Girl is that is a gothic horror movie through and through.
Right.
It's Scooby-Doo Japaneseified, It is a Western film made in Japan, essentially. And while this is a more true Japanese horror film, so to speak.
Yeah. But which film did you prefer then, out of the two?
I got to give it to 100 Monsters. Like you, I myself was blown away by Snake Girl and the Silver-Haired Witch. I was genuinely shocked by how that film actually turned out to be. From going into it thinking, oh, this is just going to be another run-of-the-mill horror movie, coming out kind of surprised and shocked by what it turned out to be. It has its place, and I still highly regard that film.
Right. It's Yuasa's best movie.
It literally is. Like, I don't care about Gamera. Snake Girl and Silver-Haired Witch is Yuasa's best movie. Who knows? Maybe his film... Didn't he do the If You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands? I think he did that.
Something like that. Yeah.
I think so. Who knows? Maybe he did better stuff when he wasn't doing a genre movie director. But either way, I really enjoyed that one, and it really surprised me. But 100 Monsters is one of those films that, like, I would draw inspiration from. And I kind of have, in Edokami no Gyakushu, that story is very influenced by Japanese horror, yokai, kaiju.
I mean, the thing for
J-horror.
me with like taking influence from, I can't say this film hasn't necessarily like inspired me to, maybe just try a little bit with some yokai artwork for some like fun in Blender. But I question if that's necessarily from the film or just how interesting yokai themselves are.
That's fair. Yeah. But either way, I really enjoy 100 Monsters, and I'm excited to see, what this month brings. We are in a themed month. We won't reveal the theme yet, but I'm excited to see how it turns out. I think we will end up really taking a lot from this month, and I'm excited for the listeners to follow us through this set of episodes and to see where this story takes us, if you will. Nonetheless, I really enjoyed 100 Monsters, and it probably is one of my favorite Daiei films, to be honest. But with that, Rex, do you have anything else you want to say?
Not that I haven't already mentioned, no.
All right. Well, I just have one last thing to say, Rex. Hello. I'm Elijah, and I have a kaiju and tokusatsu problem. How ironic is that?
Very.
Joking aside, I am Elijah Thomas. I am a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com and in Kaiju Ramen Magazine, and Kaiju United, of which I am the Chief Innovative Officer for. My writing has also been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kid's Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote about Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. Outside of writing and podcasting, I also served as a consultant on the upcoming Titanic Creations officially licensed Yongari articulated figure. Go to titanicreations.com/Yongari to order yours today. I have also had the privilege to produce bonus features for SR Cinema, like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. I have worked on Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo, Liverleaf, and War of the Ninja Monsters, Jiron vs. Gora, and as I previously established, now the upcoming title, Sharkdemic. You can order all of these Blu-rays on srscinema.com. I'm also a filmmaker and YouTuber. You can check out my stuff on my YouTube channel, ET13 Productions, where you can see some of my short films and old YouTube videos, along with an ever-growing playlist that features all of my appearances on YouTube. I do plan to eventually get new videos out. I actually have released a short film I did, The Invisible Teacher, so I am working on it. You can also check out my action figure photography on my Instagram at ET13_productions and my ex, the artist formerly known as Twitter, thanks Danny, at the same handle. Rex, where can people find you at?
Well, dear listeners, you can find me on YouTube at Rexino, on Twitter at Rex_Xenomorph, and on Instagram, Rex_Xeno. And if you want to check out some of my writing, go take a look at the Tokusatsu Network.
And as for the podcast, don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, I don't actually, that's a lie. This joke is going to get too old eventually.
Yes.
You can rate us on Spotify. To stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, head over to www.kaijuconversation.com to find all of our episodes, social media, news, and updates. Follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And as always, we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually, we'll have original artwork on there, but until then, you can sport our awesome logo or on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. Most recently, in our server, there was a conversation about McDonald's dipping sauce.
Naturally.
I'm not going to ask any questions.
It came from a discussion about Battle Royale, of all things.
It's a great community full of great people.
Hey,
and wild
the people discussing them are awesome.
Oh, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes post exclusives to the channel, like bloopers for episodes or minisodes. We sometimes post exclusives to the channel, like bloopers for episodes or minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with MechaGodzilla designer Jared Krzyzewski on the channel. I definitely butchered his name. I'm so sorry about that. And a huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found in the description below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to Danny DiManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website, GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Grattan Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. Episode 1 of this October spooky season is in the bag. Episode 105. 5 episodes into 100. First episode into October. And we're nearing the end of 2024.
Ugh.
We have, after this month, we have 2 months left. And then we're entering a new season of Kaiju Conversation. 2025 is coming up, and it's going to be a great year. So there's a little bit of a teaser for you.
I'm not ready for 2024 to be over.
I know. Honestly, this year's kind of went by kind of fast, it feels like.
They all go by fast, but god damn it. This is too fast. Slow down, life.
Yeah. And so much has happened. Honestly, we might have to do like a 2024 retrospective to kind of just...
Soon enough. Well, the years will just keep going by and we'll be 30 in no time.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
You're welcome.
No, don't welcome. Say that.
You're closer than me.
Barely. You know,
barely 2 years difference.
Imagine what episode we'd be on when we hit that. Like, you and I both are in our 30s. Like, you just turned 30. I'm a little over. Like, that would be wild.
Would we still even be friends?
That's a great question. I don't think you could put up with me for that long. Well, we can at least say this.
We'll find out in 10 years.
We will. But we can say this. Kaiju Conversation is here to stay, and we are excited for what's coming. So, again, thank you all for listening. And as always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We are set, we are in debt. There's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. Kaiju. Not too big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now.